I would like to know what is the tariff, first things first, like why the United States wants to impose these high tariffs, and not only on China, but many other countries. What is the objective? Let's start with this of Donald Trump and why he has a particular focus on China.
My understanding is that it's extremely difficult to understand the rationale behind this tariff offensive on Trump's part and on the part of his administration, because it isn't very rational. It isn't very rational. One can try to figure out what they might want to be doing. They are making certain statements. We will get to that, what they think they are doing. But I think it's important to be clear that we don't try to impose on this a rationality it doesn't have, right? I really like the term that the economic historian Adam Tooze has recently coined for this. He called it sane washing, right? We shouldn't sane wash Trump's economic policies because they aren't very sane. So having said all of this, right, what he seems to want to do is most of all three things. One is the idea that he wants to reindustrialize the United States. So for Trump, and this is a very old idea, he formulated this publicly even when he was a private citizen in the 1980s already. For Trump, what has gone wrong in American recent history, one of the things that has gone wrong is that they have lost their industrial base, their manufacturing base, their factories, right? People making stuff, right? And they have shifted too far towards services and non-material parts of the economy, finance, and so on. He wants to keep all of this, of course, but he also wants a solid manufacturing base to come back to the United States. So in a way, he resists the decades-long trends of globalization and offshoring. He wants to onshore again, right? That's one thing. And how this connects to the tariffs, we have to get into this in a second. The second thing that he's trying to promise people is that the tariffs themselves will make so much money that the state doesn't have to tax them that much anymore, right? There is something fundamentally wrong about this promise, as every economist can tell you, but let's repeat it, which is that if you raise import tariffs, you are in effect taxing your population and your businesses, right? So this whole thing that he's setting up by saying, oh, I'm going to tariff these other countries, and then you Americans won't have to pay taxes, right, or less taxes, is bullshit. Economically speaking, it's complete nonsense, right? Because the tariff that he puts on these outside countries, these importers, comes back in costs in various ways to the population and the businesses inside the United States, and it's de facto a tax, right?
Yes.
This is why some critics say that Trump has actually turned into a high tax president through his tariffs, right? That's number two. Number three, Trump has a very pathological relationship. I think it's obsessive. I think he really can't think clearly about this. He has a pathological relationship to trade deficits.
Yes.
For Trump, every trade deficit is not an expression of what happens in given economies in terms of investments and savings. It's an expression of something being deeply wrong, morally wrong, a raw deal in which the United States has been abused, he believes, right? So he wants to write, as he sees it, all these trade deficits. He has this very, very primitive and really misguided idea, economically speaking, that the answer to a trade deficit is to simply balance it out, force somehow the other side into such a relationship that in the end the deficit goes away. Now, there's one footnote to this, which is that on services, the United States runs a trade surplus with a lot of countries, and he never notices that.
Yes.
So if those countries were to apply the same bad logic to him or to the United States that he applies to them, things would get even more destructive because they would raise all sorts of de facto tariffs, it's a bit tricky, against the American services on which America has a surplus and the other countries have deficits, right? Now, these are the three main things we see sort of in the Trumpian rhetoric. Let me add one thing to be fair. A lot of observers acknowledge that there have been certain imbalances, sometimes really in the disfavor of the United States, very often in favor of the United States. He never sees that. So, where there are imbalances in the United States' disfavor, he has a certain degree, he has to a certain degree a point. But the proportions here are very important. Nothing that he has done now makes any sense in response to that. It just doesn't work this way, and it is completely out of proportion. And in the end, it will hurt a lot of people outside the United States. But Trump, after all, is a national egotist, right? He
Yes.
doesn't acknowledge that people outside the United States count. Okay, let's for a moment think in his terms. It will also hurt a lot of Americans and a lot of American businesses. This is not going to work for anybody. That's the irony here.
I mean, this can't be just the idea of Trump, right? He has a big economic team in his administration, and they're all envisioning or they're all planning on this strategy, let's say vis-a-vis China, particularly, in order to rebalance the trade relationship, to bring back the manufacturing, let's say, powerhouses to the United States. Those are America first, let's say, policies, right? I mean, this is the goal, to bring the manufacturers and factories back home. But the strategy that you say and many others experts say is wrong. But if things go south, I think in this case, then the damage to the US economy could be irreversible, especially that the US is also saying or preparing for another costly war in the Middle East. This sounds a little bit suicidal for me.
Well, it's interesting that you said irreversible damage, right?
Yeah.
You know how I think about the de facto despot of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, right?
Mhm.
And nevertheless, I have to agree with her on one thing. She has said today, or maybe she said it yesterday, very recently, that there is no way back to the status quo
Mm.
already. No way back to the status quo already. Now, and you know as well as I do that Ursula von der Leyen doesn't serve the Europeans. She actually
No.
serves Washington, right?
Mm.
She's basically an American agent. So if this American agent at the head of the European Union actually also says what Trump has done is in effect so bad that there's no way back to the status quo before, then clearly something irreversible has already happened. And you're absolutely right about this. So these people, these MAGA fans of Trump, who still try to rationalize his recent steps, right, since so-called Liberation Day, right, by saying, oh, that was all just a tactical ploy. He was just putting on the pressure, so they have to come and negotiate with him. Or as he says, he himself said that, I'm quoting an American president, they have to come and kiss his ass, right?
Yes.
This is his language, right? All these
They are
people are,
kissing. They are kissing his ass. This is what he said.
yes, but the people who think that this was a brilliant chess game, that he used these tactics of arm twisting, and now they will get everything they want in the trade relationships, and otherwise there is no loss. Otherwise, it goes back to as things were before. They are completely wrong. Even if certain trade relationships, and he will manage to do that, are sort of recalibrated to be even more advantageous to the United States, they will also pay a price already, right? And the
Yes.
price is that they have shown how far they are willing to go. And they have shown it not only towards China, right? That's bad enough. They've shown it to everyone, literally everyone in the world at once this time. That experience will not go away anymore. So they've given a big push even to people in Europe, even to people in the European Union who are extremely submissive and want to obey the United States. Even these people, they have forced them to think about a future in which the United States is not only not a reliable partner militarily, talking about NATO and all that, but is a very dangerous force in the world economy, out to ruin them. Not that that's the first time.
Yep.
Now, considering China, it's really hard to see how Trump thinks this can end. Because look, he has made a point of humiliating China in his rhetoric. Famously, this is a country with an extremely intense, and rightly so, memory of being humiliated by the West in a
Yes.
quasi colonial situation, right? They call it the 100 years of humiliation. And the Chinese and their government, and I think they are seeing the world in the same terms there, see it as the great achievement of post-revolutionary, post-World War II, essentially China, that whatever else happened, it put an end to that. And it then rose to such power and such wealth that this can no longer be done to it.
Yes.
And here comes Trump and essentially says to, literally personally, to the ruler of China, to Xi Jinping, kiss my ring. Come here first and bow, and then we can talk. And there comes this primitive, I'm sorry, idiot, Scott Bessent, right? And says, oh, they shouldn't retaliate. That was a stupid idea,
Yep.
Why didn't they just let us slap them in the face? Everything would be okay, right? It tells you a lot about Scott Bessent, by the way, and people like him because that's how they make their career. That's probably what he's done a lot in his life. He got slapped in his face by his superiors and he didn't retaliate. And that's how he rose, right? That's how he sees the world. But he doesn't understand that the Chinese are on one side more honorable, but they're also wiser. Because the Chinese understand that if you let them do this to you, there will be no end. Not only to humiliation, but to exploitation. They will try then to do to you what they just tried to do to Russia. Namely, they will try to degrade you into a second-rate power. And there we come back to what you said at the beginning, which is there's something here reminiscent of the attack on Russia that unfolded since basically 2014 and then intensified, right? Very reminiscent. Because although up until now, in the case of China, they're not yet using military means directly or through proxies, what they're trying to do, the aim is very similar. They're trying to destroy a competitor. They're trying to take them down in the geopolitical hierarchy. And Beijing sees this, of course, because it's damn obvious. I mean, if you miss this, you must be blind, right? So this is an all or nothing situation. This isn't just about trade at all. This isn't just about trade at all, and they will not give in. At least they will not give in first, and they will not give in alone. The best that Trump still can hope for is that the Chinese allow him somehow in the end to save a little face. But they will definitely not submit to him. And what a lot of economists tell us is, look, the share of Chinese exports to the world, right? The share of that goes to the United States is about 15%. You mentioned GDP. This is another statistic. That means that, yes, the United States can do damage. It can. It will also damage itself in the process, but it cannot prevail. This whole idea that Trump seems to have, that the United States has such power over China that it can simply impose its will, is completely misguided. It's unrealistic. It is as unrealistic as the idea of those people who try to take down Russia through Ukraine. So this is going to be their second attempt to do something very stupid, right? And here's another point. They are also making double sure, because this is sure anyhow, but they're adding something. They're making double sure that the Russians and the Chinese will stay together in what is de facto an alliance already. They're making it
bringing
so
them even
clear.
closer again. Yes.
Of course they are. Of course they are. None of this makes sense. But one last point, and I'm talking too long, but one last point. I think if you want to see why the Trumpists are doing what they're doing, not that it will work, but why they're trying to do this, I think you have to think not in terms of what advantages do they hope to gain for America, not with respect to China. The policy toward China is much more aggressive. It's what are they trying to do to China? This is
Yes.
about destroying China, not even about gaining advantage for the US. And they will
Mm.
fail.